This is a brand new Cadillac Escalade ESV Platinum. It's the long wheelbase version of the Escalade in the top-end trim level. And aside from a few high-end Tesla models, this is the single most expensive American car you can buy today. This thing, with shipping and options, has a window sticker price of $97,800. So today I'm going to show you around a Cadillac Escalade with a $100,000 sticker price. Now, I borrowed this Escalade ESV Platinum here in Salt Lake City, one of my favorite cities, using a service called Turo, which allows you to rent other people's cars instead of normal, boring rental cars. I chose the Escalade because right now it is the symbol of modern American opulence and extravagance, with its huge size and this massive grille and its hulking V8 engine. So today I'm going to show you around this thing and show you what a $100,000 Cadillac Escalade is like. And then I'm going to take it out on the road and see what it's like to drive. And as always, for more of my thoughts on the Escalade experience, click the link below for my column on autotrader.com/oversteer. Before the tour, a little history lesson. The Escalade first went on sale 20 years ago, and at the time it was laughable. A Chevy Tahoe with some extra leather, some fake wood, and a Cadillac logo on the steering wheel instead of a Chevy badge. It's amazing anybody ever fell for it, but fall for it they did, and now we have this, the 4th generation Escalade, which just came out. It has a huge 420 horsepower V8, and it'll do 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds for an SUV that weighs nearly 6,000 pounds, or 3 tons. But this thing isn't all about power and style, it's also loaded with cool stuff. Like, for example, my all-time favorite new Escalade feature, the tail lights. I don't know if you can see this, but the tail light is this entire unit. This is all the tail light and the brake light. Look at this. It is this big. The brake light is this large. It's half my body size. This is a 3.5-foot brake light. If I was a deer and I was walking around on the street and I came up behind one of these and I saw those brake lights illuminated, I think I would have a new god. And the light ridiculousness isn't confined to the rear. Take a look at the headlights. These things are enormous, and they have these giant bulbs facing you, just intimidating everybody they see. And visually, it kind of looks like they go all the way through the bumper down here. These things are crazy. And the craziness continues in the front with the grille. Look how big this giant chrome grille is. And more importantly, look how big this Cadillac logo is. Here's my head next to the Cadillac logo. And since I'm discussing size, I might as well talk about the overall size of the Escalade. But first, let me take a walk to get to the back of it. This thing is 224 inches long, which makes it 2 feet longer than a long wheelbase Range Rover, and over a yard longer than a regular Range Rover. In fact, if you were to take the footprint of this vehicle, length times width, you'd find that this is 130 square feet of car. That's half the size of the average hotel room in New York City. And you're just driving it down the street. But of course, the Escalade is loaded with cool features inside. First, you have to climb inside, and when you do, you'll notice that retractable running board. So you can step in, close the door, and then... Now let me take you through some of this thing's cool tech features. One of the things I like the most is a cool feature that the touchscreen infotainment system has. You're driving down the road and you'll notice that there are no options displayed like climate or radio. So how do you change all that stuff? Well, when you get your finger close to the touchscreen, it senses your finger's presence, and then it pops up the menu for you to be able to change stuff. Otherwise, the screen is just full of whatever you want it to be. That's pretty cool. Another thing I love about the touchscreen is, unlike virtually every other touchscreen on every other car, this one actually gives feedback. When you push something, it not only vibrates, but it makes a sound so you know you've actually touched something. Another cool feature you'll discover when you get in the car, hidden under these wood panels in the middle, are cup holders. Not just any cup holders, but they're cooled cup holders. Open up this giant center console and you'll find a big box in the middle. Not just any box, but a refrigerated box. Another cool feature I really like in the front is the heads-up display, which is projected onto the windshield directly in front of the driver. It's multicolor, and unlike a lot of other heads-up displays, it's configurable. You can make it show you which direction you're heading, what music you're listening to, the speed limit, which is useful, and also your tachometer, so you know where your revs are. The heads-up display is also movable, which I find really cool. Press a little button to the left of the gauge cluster, and the heads-up display moves all over the windshield to wherever it's easiest for you. Tell me that isn't awesome. It looks like the future. Also awesome is the gauge cluster, which provides an enormous amount of useful information. Scroll over to the right, you can look at the direction you're going, your phone situation, options, just some needles, and the music you're listening to. In the middle, you have the choice of seeing the digital speed or the old school analog speedometer. And over on the left, you have a bunch of different items you can scroll through, like tire pressure and average fuel economy and battery voltage. And it's all very easy and rather slick. Now, all of that is controlled with a series of buttons on the steering wheel. And I have to admit, the button setup on this steering wheel is one of the most impressive I've ever seen. I counted, and there are 17 buttons on this steering wheel. More impressive than that, over on the right side, you have on the bottom an up-down arrow. Above that, you have a right-left arrow, and above that, you have a button marked select. Basically, you have a button on top of a button on top of a button. And the button situation in this car gets more out of control the more you look around, because as you start to peruse the interior, you'll find a lot of buttons that, well, you don't even really know what they do.
For example, here's a button with a one-eyed child on it. Here's a button with a slash through the bumper. You are now prohibited from accessing the bumper. Here's a button showing a pool noodle on top of the seat. And here's a button with a snowflake inside of a window next to a house. Fortunately, at least one button is labeled very obviously, glove box. Push it and, well, the obvious happens.
Interestingly, for a car that loves buttons and switches, they've decided to skip the traditional controls in some rather unusual places. For example, there's no volume knob. Instead, you just slide your finger for volume up and slide your finger for volume down. Up, down, up, down. It's actually kind of addicting. But the front seat occupants don't get to have all the fun. In back, there's a rear seat entertainment system. Push a latch on the ceiling and then a screen folds down. But what if your rear passengers can't agree on what to watch? Well, fortunately, there are 2 other screens in the rear for that exact scenario. And yes, all of this is factory. This car comes, the Platinum trim level, with 3 rear screens. Another cool feature, you've heard about the headlights lighting up when you press the unlock button in a car. In this thing, not only do the headlights light up, but the door handles light up as you approach it at night. That's pretty cool. It also lets you know that you're about to get into your cocoon and away from the working class. And there are even cool features all the way back here. Check this out. Little buttons on this side let you drop the 3rd row of seats. That's pretty common in high-end luxury SUVs. What isn't so common is there's another little set of buttons that let you drop the 2nd row of seats. So you never have to fuss around with stupid latches or annoying levers and tabs ever again. Just push a button and they're down. This is also one of those cars where you can just wave your foot under the rear bumper and the tailgate opens. Allow me to demonstrate. See, that was easy. That's a lot easier than just pulling it open. But there's one little problem with the Escalade, namely, even when you pay $100,000 and buy one of the most expensive American cars on sale today, you still get a little bit of an unfortunate reminder of 20 years ago, because this thing is still a Chevy truck underneath, and sometimes it shows. Maybe a little bit too much. Now, in every other high-end luxury SUV, the gear lever is this finely crafted affair, and the Range Rover, it rises automatically out of the center console when you start the car. In this thing, it's an old column shifter, and it flops around. It's crazy. It's like you're driving an 85 Chevy pickup and you're shifting into gear so you can go haul some hogs to market. Another thing I really don't like about this car, or something I don't like about most GM cars, but especially this one for $100,000, is this ridiculously complicated stalk coming out of the steering column. Look at this thing. It controls the windshield wipers, the rear wipers, the washer jets, the brights, the turn signals. I count 1 switch, 1 roller dial, 1 button. The entire thing moves forward, and part of it moves forward, and at the end of it, you press a little button for the rear wipers. It is way too complicated. It has way too much writing on it. It absolutely has no place in a Chevy Tahoe, let alone a $100,000 Cadillac Escalade. Another disappointment in this car is the door panels. They look really cheap compared to rival models. Also, in the back, there aren't any cup holders for the 2nd row. The only cup holder that you will find is right here in the door panel, and it's this tiny little shallow cup holder that couldn't possibly hold any drink that a Cadillac Escalade owner would ever want to order. Now, another rather cheap design element in this Escalade. This Escalade has a feature that I absolutely love. You can open the rear window independently of the tailgate. So if you want to just load something small in, you don't have to open the whole thing. Most cars don't have this anymore. But in creating this, Cadillac has made kind of an unfortunate situation. The brake light is mounted on the rear window that opens. And so in order to run the wires to the brake light, Cadillac has fitted these weird phone cord looking things. Not only are they cheap, but they look like the exact kind of thing that's going to break when you're loading cargo in, which is the purpose of all this. Another cheap design detail, despite the Escalade's LED lights with their aggressive look both front and back, the front turn signal is just a regular old cheap halogen bulb like every other car has. Every time you put on the turn signal, you can think to yourself, cost cutting, cost cutting, cost cutting, cost cutting, cost cutting. The final disappointment up here, guess what you won't find? A panoramic sunroof. It's available on every single one of the Escalade's competitors, but Cadillac won't install it on the Escalade, or shall I say, the Tahoe Limited. So there's some cool features and there's some rather unfortunate Chevy details. The real question is, how does this thing drive? Time to take it on the road and find out. All right. I'm driving the Escalade. The first thing you notice when you get in this car, and it is unavoidable, this thing is truly, truly enormous. The person that I rented this from has the car completely tinted with dark window tint in the back. And so when I look back there, it's like I'm staring into the abyss. It's legitimately hard to see the end of this car back there. Now, it's incredibly quiet. Done an amazing job with sound insulation, far better than the Tahoe. With that said, there are a few rattles. That's the Chevy Tahoe part of the Escalade coming out. This thing doesn't actually feel that heavy just because of the way that they've made the steering so light, and it kind of wafts down the road, and you're really insulated from the road, so you don't really feel that you're driving an enormously big car. But then you glance in your mirror and it's like, whoa, that's still me back there. It is amazing how quiet this thing is. Compared to a Tahoe or a Yukon, they've really put an enormous amount of extra sound deadening in this car. The ride quality is just excellent. It's to die for. I mean, it just feels oh so smooth. I have to admit, although I gave the car some crap for having all those Chevy Tahoe parts, when you're sitting in the driver's seat, you actually don't see most of them. Most of the stuff directly in front of me is pretty nice. You do, I mean, there is definitely a rattle here at the steering wheel. Car has 20,000 miles on it. Now, one interesting thing is the car actually doesn't feel all that floaty. The Tahoe and the pickups feel pretty floaty. The suspension in this is clearly tuned for a little bit more feedback. One thing that I've interestingly found, Salt Lake City is famous for having these big culverts sort of between intersections for water drainage. And one thing I found is the Escalade actually scrapes on them. This car doesn't have a lot of ground clearance. If you're even thinking about the littlest bit of off-roading, this is absolutely not the car for you. All right, I'm gonna give it some gas here. Here goes, let's see what happens. You know, it's quick, I guess. It's quick. I think the biggest problem, it is accelerating fairly quick. I think the biggest problem is that you're just so insulated from the road. I gotta be 5 feet off the road here, so I don't feel like it feels very quick. It's such a bizarre feeling, you know, you're doing 0 to 60 in 6.5, and you're like, yeah, it's kind of slow. When I'm out on the open road, as I am now in this car, just big 3 lanes, 6 lanes, nothing going on, I feel like I could cruise forever. I have all this luxury. I'm behind a Grand Cherokee now, and I just feel better than him. I'm so much larger and taller than that car. When I'm sitting at a stoplight, as I am now, without the music on, I can't hear a thing. I can't hear a single cry from the plebeians outside my beautiful walls. So that's the Cadillac Escalade ESV Platinum. I personally would never buy this car. It's too big, too showy, too extravagant, too opulent, too gigantic, too in your face, too chrome. But I have to admit, after driving this thing around for a few days, I understand why some people buy these. When you're in there, you feel like the king of the road, sitting on your throne, insulated from everything, surrounded by all your technology and gadgets, and with a giant V8 at your disposal. You know, in the 1950s, people bought giant Cadillacs with huge tail fins and crazy bright colors to show off their status. Today, 60 years later, for that same Cadillac tail fin experience, this is the car. That was easy.